Troy, Matt, Jody. And so what is the process and is a commission appointed?
Yep, so there's an application process now that anybody interested fills out an application, and then that goes to the commissioners, and they do the appointment. We have 2 that are on file from earlier this year when we had the 2 openings. So I did call each of them, and they are still interested, so there are 2 applicants currently, so.
Do we need to open it up for more applicants?
That would be up to the county commissioners at this point. So there is a special meeting tomorrow where we will discuss this, and so if they choose to open it up for more applicants, that is up to them, so.
What would you guys prefer?
What's that?
Would you prefer we opened it, or did you have 2 already that were interested last time?
That's up to you guys.
Well, I guess I'm always open to suggestions.
I think it'd probably be a good idea to open it up.
Well, just like suggestions, when he always said, "Do you want pizza next time?" I said, "Yeah." I appreciate it, you guys.
Yeah. Okay, work session. Bess is first on the list.
So I sent everybody a copy of the updates last week. Everything is highlighted in yellow, so if you haven't had a chance to look at it, here it is. It's with all the changes that were discussed last week. And then there are obviously probably a couple of spots where we weren't 100% sure on, but kind of like the International Fire Code, that's on the very first page that had question marks. That was talked about at the meeting. That is what North Dakota uses. I have not heard as far as what we should be changing to within here yet, so.
Okay. And you say all the highlighted areas?
All the highlighted areas are what was changed.
Okay. Does anyone have any comments or objections? Would this be ready for approval then?
No, so we don't have international fire code.
Yeah, we would have to update it with the International Fire Code portions in there. I hesitate to change it and then just put it up for hearing right away, just in case there's something that isn't quite right, but.
No, and I'll ask again, has everyone,
Carly's letter by this.
Carly from Minn Kota, there's an email with information. She had talked to BNI about the setbacks with an open and active coal seam. And then the fire risks. After she spoke with BNI, they stated that they're not that they're not concerned, but they don't feel that there is a substantial risk of fire. And they have a pretty hefty mitigation plan. So, as far as that goes, there's just one portion in that email where it says like a 500-foot setback instead of 2 mile,
Would be sufficient.
that would be sufficient to them. But again, they stated that ultimately that is up to you as the board as far as that setback goes. But,
I guess I'd be willing to change that.
You really did. To 500.
Instead of the 2 miles, moving it to 500 feet within 500 feet of an open and active coal seam. I did change that in there where it said open coal seam, I did include the word active, because I know that was something. 31.6.
Mr. Chair, should we go through just number one, just the changes one by one and just check off, okay, that one looks good, check off, that one looks good? And just do it that way instead of bouncing around? So the International Fire Code, we're still kind of up in the air with that one, so we'll
Do you
wait.
have any idea how long it would take for your?
To get that information,
Yeah.
hopefully not very long. I don't have an estimated time frame on that one, but I tried to get these done as soon as I could after last week's meeting, but I had commission meeting the next day and it was just, I got them done as fast as I could, but that part I just wasn't sure, cause I know Matt had said he was gonna look into it, I think Patrick was looking at some of it.
Okay, we can go with them one by one. The first one is 31.4. Must comply with state and county meetings to the extent of 20% before the hours. Is that agreeable with everyone?
You have to, it's in the code.
Okay. 35.2.
I think there was a question on fire breaks that Nexera had put in there, and I wasn't sure, so I highlighted it because we didn't quite touch on that one last week.
She's got something in here about fire breaks.
And I don't know if that's something that we just talked about, maybe just taking out altogether, because if there's a mitigation plan with some of it, I don't know how much we would need fire breaks there, I guess.
Yeah, I think we do have some team members here that can speak to this subject matter more specifically.
Okay.
Now would be a good time to maybe have them introduce themselves and provide some feedback regarding that question.
It's up to you, Bill.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, if you just,
Yep.
usually we just go through the table.
Go
Yes,
with it.
please.
Yeah.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Wow. So lovely. Thank you. I'll take this.
I was
God.
gonna say, we have better chairs than that.
I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind sitting.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. There you go.
I'd like to go in place.
Thank you. So yeah, my name is Matt Rippey. I've worked for Nexera for 13 years now. I was electrical engineer out of school, started in substations, so working on relaying and communications and things like that. Did that for 4 years. And since 2019, I've been working in some capacity on battery storage. I worked on market participation models for a year or so, back to the utility, and kind of worked on some smart grid stuff for a year. And then since 2021, have been working on our battery storage development team. I recently, a week ago, transitioned off that team, but up until that point, I was executive director of our the portion of the team that focused on storage in the Midwest. That's sort of the country. So.
And I'm Alex Murphy. I've been at Nexera for about a year. I'm a project manager in engineering and construction specifically for battery energy storage. Prior to this role, I've worked in utilities my entire career. I spent the last 8 years as a construction project manager developing substation, transmission, and distribution line projects from conceptual engineering all the way through construction closeout.
Okay.
So yeah, we can start, if you want to go through the questions. We also are happy to give kind of an overview of battery storage. I understand maybe you guys wanted some of that, and we can do that later too if you want. But in terms of the specific question on fire breaks, I think one of the things to consider for our sites, and for most battery sites that fall under the remote category in either the International Fire Code or NFPA 855, and by the way, the NFPA 855 and the International Fire Code 1207 are essentially identical. So they're very, very similar. Battery sites that classify as remote and under those codes are 100 feet away from the nearest property line or nearest any other boundary. And so that 100 feet, which is typically rocked with similar rocking to what you would see in a substation, and there's a fence outside, is a fire break, right? If there's containers on, there will be containers on the inside of that, and then you have the fence on the outside, and it's essentially a 100-foot fire break if there was ever a thermal event to break out in the battery facility.
Okay.
And that's a relatively sizable fire break. You hear of, this is not my area of expertise, but you hear of, 10 foot or 1.5 times the height of the closest vegetation, things like that. So, a 100-foot fire break would be relatively substantial from what I understand.
Take into account lots of wind.
So, these codes are designed to accommodate batteries in various parts of the country, including this area of North Dakota, which obviously does have a lot of wind. But, the containers themselves are roughly 20 feet by, typically the ones we use are roughly 20 feet by 10 feet high by like 8 or 10 feet wide.
Shipping container.
Yeah, kind of like a shipping container, right? So they're not extremely large, I guess. So 100-foot, fire break for that, it's very unlikely that you would have something jump even with a significant degree of wind.
Okay. Now, is there a fire break like that at the tower sites too?
For wind turbines?
Yeah.
That I'm not sure. My is batteries, and I'm not sure. I know there's typically kind of a pad around the outside of the tower. But,
Yeah, there's a cement pad that the turbine is grounded in, if that makes sense, like how it stays standing up, but there's no fire break around a wind turbine.
Okay. The concrete base.
Correct, that concrete pad that they pour, yeah, that's to keep it vertical.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have any fire resistant properties or fire containing properties. But to your point, Matt, a substation will have that same rock, not necessarily again for fire protection per se, but just that's how they're designed.
Well, so it's actually for electrical protection. In a substation, right, you have a ground grid that goes underneath the substation, and if you're walking, right, you don't want to be electrically connected to that ground grid in the event that there's some issue in that substation. You can have actually pretty significant voltage between where your right foot is and your left foot is, which is kind of interesting, but also very dangerous, and so that's why they put the rock in the substation. Yeah, but it does act as a fire break.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and would it be helpful to give kind of a primer on battery storage? Or?
Sure, I think it would, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And we can wait till the end too, for you guys, or prefer to do it now?
Yeah, maybe do it
Go
now.
ahead.
Help explain things as you're here.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we run into all the time is, why would you install a giant battery storage facility and what does it do? And so I like to start kind of there. The reason that you want batteries, right, is for dispatchable energy. So the utilities want them to be able to provide energy when they need it. And so they go through these long-term planning processes where they think about how much load do I have, what are the resources that I'm going to have to meet that load, and what's the likelihood that those resources are going to show up when I need them to. And they factor in outages and weather conditions and resource, if it's a wind site or a solar site, all these different things. And what they're trying to do is bring together a mix of resources that's best going to allow them to serve that load in the worst case possible times. And so batteries are great because they actually provide, we don't have a lot of batteries on the system. And so if you think about, we've had winter storms that have come down and knocked out the power in Texas and other places, and we've had some events that have caused really big disruptions on the grid. And they've mostly occurred because we have kind of single points of failure, whether it's gas supply or we have different individual resources that don't perform as well under those weather conditions. And batteries actually add a little bit of diversity to the grid. And so utilities, while there aren't that many on the system, love this as an opportunity to increase diversity and increase the reliability of their grid. And so when they install batteries, that allows them to go and add more load. Specifically in North Dakota, you can look at things like basins, resource plans, and things like this that describe why they want to add new resources. It's really to enable all the load they see coming, whether that's expansion of oil and gas infrastructure in the Williston Basin or different other loads that might be coming into their service territory, manufacturing data centers, whatever it is. But a lot of it in this area is really to help the expansion of the industries that are in the area. And so that's why the batteries are installed. They're installed there to be dispatchable, and then they're also installed to make better use of the transmission system. If you have a lot of generation at certain times when you don't need it, and you don't have a ton of generation when you do, battery's great because it alleviates pressure both ways on the transmission system. You can charge when you don't need the energy, you can discharge when you do. And so they use it to better, instead of having to build new transmission lines to other places, a battery will allow them to make better use of the existing transmission system that's out there. So, pause there. That's a lot.
So how much electricity can you store? Let's say the wind doesn't blow for a week.
Yeah.
Could you run off those batteries that long?
Good question. So the main premise that they're trying to, so it's 4 hours typically is what the battery systems are designed to. If we're going to build a battery system now in most parts of the country, it's going to be a certain megawatt rating, call it 100 megawatts, and 4 hours of duration. So it'll be able to provide that 100 megawatt rate for 4 hours. The reason for that is combined with all the other resources that are on the grid, they can normally fill in the gaps. So you normally aren't running 100% of your resources 100% of the time. You normally are running, most of your resources during your peak hours, which might be, 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. or maybe a little bit earlier, depending on where you are in the country. But you normally have a load shape that kind of goes into a peak and then a lull. And when it goes into the lull, you ramp down your other resources. And so when they do that analysis to figure out, okay, how much is a battery worth compared to a wind plant, compared to a coal plant, compared to a gas plant, whatever it is, and looking at all those outages, they're also looking at the load shape. And what's come out is until you have a lot of batteries on the system, a 4-hour battery allows you to meet all of your load during those worst case times, because during the other periods you can ramp up a bunch of your other units. So that's kind of the way it works. And so the battery would only, if you were solely relying on the battery, you're only going to get 4 hours out of it. But because the beauty of the way they do these things and the way they kind of combine all these resources on the grid is that they can use all the other resources that are out there to help support, and that's where that diversity comes in. You don't want to have all batteries, just like you don't want to have all wind farms, just like you don't want to have all gas plants.
Is it all an automated process?
So a lot of it is, yeah, so there's a economic optimization that runs every 5 minutes for this part of for Southwest Power Pool, which runs the grid in this area. That's automated. And so every 5 minutes it determines, here's all the resources I have available, here's what my load is, and I'm going to pick, which resources are cheapest so that I can serve the load for the lowest possible cost. In those hours when load's really high and stuff's hitting the fan, there's some manual intervention, and they'll call up plant operators and do some things manually, but most of the time it's running automatically. And it's a 5-minute process. And they have some balancing that happens every 4 seconds that's also automated.
What happens if you have a computer malfunction?
Oh, well, we have redundancy on everything, right? We have 2 separate servers that get data, our dispatch signals from 2 separate pathways for each of our plants from the system operator. And the system operator itself has separate data centers that they can throw over to, they'll have their primary data center that runs most of the time. If that one was to, sink into the ground or whatever happens, they have another data center they throw over to and things like that. At least that's the way we did it when I worked at the utility, and I assume everyone kind of does it the same way. But yeah, there's a lot of redundancy to help protect against that.
What is the life expectancy of these batteries?
It's about 30 years.
What is that one?
Yep. So we take, and they degrade over time, just like, you have a cell phone and over time your cell phone's going to go down from, lasting for 2 days to lasting for 5 hours or whatever it is. So they degrade over time. We define the end of life as when the battery is expected to reach 60% state of health. So if it starts at 4 hours in 2025, we would expect, based on all the data we've taken and what our vendors provide us, that the battery should last it should be, I guess, 60% of 4 hours is going to be about 2.5 hours. It'd probably be 2.5 hours at 2055. Now, normally what we do is we guarantee, typically what we do is, most battery developers would do this, is they would guarantee that we're always going to be able to provide 4 hours, because the utilities have to count on these. These are reliability assets. They need to make sure that they're there when they're needed. And so typically what we'll do, and that's just something to think about as you're developing your ordinance, is we will define a strategy to come back and add more battery containers as the project life continues. So maybe every 3 years or every 5 years, we'll come back and add a few more battery containers to make up for some of that capacity that was lost over that period.
Can they be recycled?
So yeah, so first off, I would say there are EPA guidelines for how to dispose of batteries, and responsible developers should obviously follow those, and that's something we would certainly advocate for. There is a recycling industry that's standing up. The prevalence of lithium-ion batteries has only kind of recently grown to the extent that it is now, largely driven by electric vehicle adoption. And so as more of those electric vehicles start to reach end of life, and they tend to reach end of life a little bit sooner than we expect our batteries to, we would expect that recycling industry to get a little bit bigger. We've worked with some folks that are kind of starting up recycling type operations, but they're all relatively new and don't have the scale that you would need for larger sites. And Alex, I don't know if you've worked at all with some of those, but yeah, it is pretty new. Ultimately, that's the expectation, right? Is, a lot of the cost of these is in the actual battery materials themselves. And so we would expect that, there would be a lot of value in harvesting the lithium and other metals out of the batteries once we do reach end of life. We do have some pilot projects where we've taken batteries, we call them second life batteries from other locations, and tried to, figure out how to better use them in our own sites. Those are mostly small scale. We don't do that at large scale projects, but we do have some projects to try to explore ways to do that, ways to make use of batteries that have reached end of life.
Is there capacity affected by the weather, like cold, hot?
So the containers themselves are climate controlled. So we have, and that's actually where, when we talk about noise and other things, that's where most of the noise comes from, either the air conditioning units or the chillers. So we have some models that are liquid cooled, and we use chillers to cool the liquid, obviously, before it passes through the modules themselves. And then we have other units that are HVACs, just like you have on your house, a little larger unit. They typically have, I've seen some models that have kind of 4 AC units, 2 on each side. I don't know how many we have on the models we have now.
The LG ones is I think 2.
2, yeah.
2 to 4.
And so they're climate controlled containers. There is, they may draw more or less power depending on the ambient temperature, because they need to run the cooling systems for longer or shorter periods of time. But we'd expect the internal temperature of the cells to remain, within the tolerances given the climate control strategy that we place.
So then how noisy do they get?
Yeah, so you can think of a lot of air conditioners right next to each other, and then the other source of noise on these sites is the inverters. So there's a little bit of a hum similar to like what you would have at a substation from a transformer, those types of things. They can be noisy immediately next to the site, but I think, we would, part of what we can work, and I'm not sure exactly where the ordinance takes noise, but we can, there's noise modeling we can do, and we typically recommend that we stay in line with the state guidance of 45 decibels at the nearest occupied structure.
Okay. Anybody else?
How long is 45 decibels?
I guess there's a bunch of scales I would recommend. I guess you look. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but if you Google, 45 decibels or decibels.
The typical one you'll get when you Google it is like a soft conversation from across the room.
Yeah. But yeah, and we can also describe a little bit about how the sites are set up as well. Our typical site is made up of several different starting from the substation, which connects to the grid. So that's where we would step up the voltage to get to the voltage that's needed to connect to the grid. Step it down when it goes to the batteries. We have different feeders that go out to a battery yard. So those are basically electrical cables that come out to the yard. And then each of those feeders has several what we call lineups tapped off of those feeders. The lineups are a combination of inverters, which change the battery direct current DC to alternating current, which is what we use in the grid. So that's the purpose of the inverter. And then we'll have maybe 3 or 4 or 5 containers behind those inverters. And so that the containers actually have the batteries in them. So the way the site is laid out, you'll have several of these lineups that are attached to underground collection lines, typically. And the inverters are, maybe around the same size as the battery containers, although I can shape maybe a little bit smaller. Within the containers, the actual batteries are stacked. So there's the individual cells are laid out in modules, which kind of look like a longer desktop computer or something you would see in a server rack. If you're familiar. So the cells are all stacked into modules, connected into modules. The modules are actually put into racks. And then we typically have what we call a battery control unit on each rack that's responsible for maintaining and monitoring all of the cells and modules in that rack and controlling that rack. And then each of those racks are connected and they run out within the container itself, and then they run out to the inverter and connect to the grid that way. You can think of a typical site of having, 50 of these containers, 100 of these containers, depending on the size of the site. But that's generally the way the sites are laid out.
Fence to keep the wildlife out.
The battery yard would be fenced in our typical design, and it would have barbed wire.
Standard 7-foot tall
What
chain
about
fence with a
flying
foot of
over
barbed wire.
Sorry.
Kind of fly. Okay.
Talking,
I
which
had
kind?
I had a turkey sit on my transformer and burn it out.
Well, so, we don't have, it depends on the design, I would say. We typically don't have a ton of overhead. And I think even the transformers and the inverters are internal typically, maybe sometimes they're not, but it depends. We don't have a ton of overhead, and you kind of get that with any electrical equipment. I wouldn't expect that to be more of a impact at a battery site than your typical electrical lines or anything else. And maybe even less just because there is, plenty of rocking and and there's some noise. Right. Yeah.
How do you select a site for the project or whatever?
Yeah. So we look at a couple different things. The first being what's going to be the most useful for the grid, right? This is supposed to be it is a reliability product. This needs to provide reliability. Where is it going to provide the most reliability to the system? So that's the primary point. Another would be how easy is it to access the grid? One of the reasons we might install this near existing generating facilities is to make use of some of the equipment that they have already built to connect to the grid. And so that's obviously a big part. And then, where we have interest from landowners and stakeholders in the project.
How much land area does one of these sites typically take up?
Yeah, it's typically,
Generally about 10 megawatts of size per 1 acre of land is the rough calculation that we use, just back of the napkin numbers.
so compared to a solar farm, it's a little bit more than 100 times less, of a similar size, but the same size project.
See, Bill, would I be able to ask a question? So that, like, both units are down right now, so they've got to buy back off the grid to start up one of the other units, whichever is first. Are you able to tie in to supply the power, or do they still buy off the grid? How are you going to incorporate, you know what I mean?
To black start a
Yep.
thermal unit. So
Because it's going to take anywhere from 0 to 30 megawatts
Yeah.
to start up
Yeah.
over 8 hours.
And so at Florida Power and Light, which is our utility, we actually have a pilot project where we've installed a battery for exactly that reason. We have a 30 megawatt battery and the tail of that remains, 50% full at all times, just in case there is a full outage and we need to black start. There is special equipment that's required for black starting. The battery itself has to have a certain type of inverter called a grid forming inverter. It allows it to kind of make the correct grid signal or the correct quality. And it has to have its own, universal power supply system that can allow the power electronics related to that battery to be powered from the power to the battery. So it can't, there are applications and folks have tested black starting before. It can happen. Not every battery would allow for that. And it would obviously have to be directly connected to the system behind wherever the disconnect is, right? You can't have it, if it's connected to the grid, well, that doesn't really help you that much. Yeah.
And that'd be my question, because if I've got a generator and I want to power up my farm, I've got to totally disconnect so somebody down the line ain't hooking up a wire that went down,
That's right.
right? So you'd have all that in place to work with, say, Midquarter or Mason or whoever.
If they wanted the battery for black start capabilities, then we would have to have that in place. That's right.
We do have customers actively asking for that right now.
Okay, that's what
Site
I'm
projects accordingly in size.
And then how much water would this take to cool it?
So it doesn't, there's no open system, right? And the chillers, I don't think actually use water. I think they use some sort of glycol, heat transfer fluid. But I'm not 100% sure on that. They may use water, but it's a closed system.
Any other questions?
Is there any lighting on these sites?
Yeah, we typically will have perimeter lighting. It's not 24/7. Typically, we'll have a motion sensor nighttime light at the control house within the substation, but there's no 24/7 lighting.
They're not tall enough to get up on the airplane ones.
Right, yeah, no, it's going to be an LED associated with that.
Yeah, the tallest, object within most of these battery sites is the transformer itself.
Yeah.
And any static
See glow 5 miles away.
Right, yeah, no.
Well,
Anyone else?
Maybe just touch on how Nextera at least monitors. I don't know if you have experience with how other utilities might monitor or not monitor, but
No, I mean,
just
I
talk
think
through our process.
that's fairly unique to us. I think some other folks have similar capabilities, but because, we come from a utility and we have a lot of experience with, monitoring controls for maintaining reliability. And so we have a 24/7 remote operating or monitoring and operations facility called the Rock. And it is, taking, I think each battery takes in about 1 million data points or something at sub-minute intervals. And so we do have a 24/7 facility that's always monitoring all these data points. We have automatic alarms that are set up so that our operators know if anything is to happen at the site. And they have remote control over the site so that they can disconnect or take some actions if something is to occur. We obviously design with, on-site protection. If communications are to fail, we have, all of the normal protection that you would expect in an electrical facility from our relaying and breakers and everything else that we put into place. But the 24/7 monitoring is something that I think is that NextEra does really well, and it's something that obviously helps us maintain the reliability of our fleet. So, is that what you're going for?
So if you're tied to the grid, like, excuse me, right now the wind gets to use the power line before the power plants. So if the wind's blowing 25, 30, we got to drop load, or we used to, when I was there. We had to drop load to make room for the wind. Is this going to be the same deal where you guys are always supplying, so they got to drop load?
Well, it's really done through that economic dispatch model that the system operator runs. What they do is they take in, the plant's operating parameters. They'll say, here's my startup time, my shutdown time, here's what it costs me in fuel to produce electricity at that given time. Here's what the wind costs, here's what the battery costs. The battery costs are a little bit of or something that is a little bit more complicated because it's not fuel, right? It's charging, so the electricity is the fuel. And so the battery costs can vary depending on what they paid to charge or what they expect to pay to charge. But if that economic dispatch determines that, ultimately it's going to be cheaper and better for ratepayers to run the battery, they may select it in that case. If it's going to be better or more reliable to run the plant, they would select the plant.
So the power to charge the batteries, you're coming off the wind transformers then? Or off the grid?
It depends on the site, right? If the battery was connected to the wind, it would come through the transformers, but it would be rare, I think, for someone to register the battery in a way where it would directly take the power from the wind. Most of the time what people do is they register these assets in a way that the wind, even if they're behind the same transformer and everything else, they're separate assets. And so everything the wind produces gets sold to the grid, and everything the battery takes gets purchased from the grid. And even when, power electrically is flowing from the wind to the battery, the wind is actually selling it. There's a transaction where the wind sells it to the grid and the battery buys it back at the same price. So all that's to say, if those are registered in the same way, and that is how all of the batteries that I have experienced in this region or in SPP are registered right now, if the batteries are registered that way, they would be optimized just like every other resource in the system to figure out what is most economic and what is most reliable.
Okay, I'm gonna have to learn more from you for that, because I got a lot of questions. I don't want to hold up their time.
Talk after. I love
Dave likes to talk, so.
you. All right.
Be prepared to have some
You guys got some coffee?
Okay, anything else? Well, then let's follow on.
Okay.
Okay, a hazard mitigation analysis addressing wildfire risk, coal seam proximity and impacts on agricultural operations per section 4, subsection 4.1. The analysis must include a risk assessment for coal seam ignition per the Science Direct article, thanks on fire propagation risks.
I didn't take this out. I know there were questions on it because we were wondering who would be doing this analysis. We didn't have that in there. And then referencing Science Direct articles wasn't necessarily maybe something that would be put in an ordinance, but I don't know that there was an issue with doing a hazard mitigation analysis, it was just how or who did it.
I
Is that-
do think Carly, and I know Matt probably has some comments on this, but I think Carly's comments might address that as well, just to point to those as
in
well.
here, yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, she mentioned a couple things specific on the article, I think, and then, I don't think, we would typically do a hazard mitigation analysis, generally, I think. I think to your question on who would review that, if this is a concern that's specific to the county, and this is something that you guys are, this is something that's not in the standards per se, or not something that anyone else has really identified as a potential risk. To me, it's most appropriate that you guys, maybe the fire department or someone from the county actually reviews it. This is the.
I'd have to be qualified.
Sure. I guess my thought would be it might be hard to find someone if this isn't a risk that was identified, by someone that was outside of the county. It might be hard to find someone that would opine on whether that risk is successfully mitigated if they don't view it as a risk, or if it's not written into the standards as a risk in the first place.
I'm just saying, I don't think I would trust my judgment on it.
No, but maybe the fire department, right? Yeah, that's fair.
From what I read in Carly's email, it's very small risk, not a big issue.
Yeah, and I think that's consistent with, the way the standards have been laid out and developed. And, we've been really active in developing a lot of the standards as well and working with the industry. And I think, those are developed to allow for battery storage facilities and any type of setting. And that's kind of how they were developed with that in mind. So I think that's consistent with our understanding as well.
So we're okay with it as written?
I guess the only thing would be the reference to the Science Direct article emphasis. That was maybe kind of questioned as it's not, Patrick doesn't have anything against using a reference that's not against Century Code or Administrative Code, but some of that changes over time. And if we put something within our ordinance that changes, that's a concern because then we have to go back in and redo the process of amending it to remove that reference or something like that, so. Yeah, up to you guys how you want it, if you wanna just leave it as is, or if you wanna change it. It's not saying that we can't amend it later on, that's not necessarily a difficult process, it's just a timely process.
Did you have a comment?
Just minor comment. I think, and I believe Carly identified this in her email as well, is the DMV study or guidance is also maybe a little bit stale. I think one of the benefits of using either the International Fire Code or NFPA is that those are updated, right? So if you and they continue to be updated as the industry learns and creates new provisions to allow for new protections. I think referring to those and the requirements there around the emergency response plan or if there is hazard mitigation analysis mentioned there, that might be a more robust way to reference that, just because it is updated over time, whereas the DMV one might not be.
Kind of to your point, take the onus off of having to come back and amend it. You guys, the onus being on you to be technical subject matter experts coming back.
If I may too, Casey Fury would probably like, just my initial thoughts are that second sentence in sub 3, it says the analysis must include a risk assessment for coal seam ignition. It seems to me, again, this is how I'm interpreting it, but it seems that that's already addressed in the first part of sub 3.
Right, where it says open coal seam proximity.
Yeah, because you're saying that your hazard mitigation analysis must include that, so it seems like it's already covered.
Sure.
So I guess my personal recommendation is because of that, it seems like you could just strike out that last sentence there. And then again, I guess I would defer to the experts like Matt with respect to that reference to the DNV, which he said is, I think that maybe a slightly outdated
Sure,
reference.
sure. Something that could be replaced with International Fire Code or.
Potentially, I don't know what the specific provisions in the International Fire Code are for hazard mitigation analysis, but I would think that those might be a little bit better than that.
So could we essentially just put a period after subsection 4.1 period and strike the rest?
That's agreeable to the four of you who are here. I'm willing to make that change.
We need to put International Fire Code in there.
Okay.
And then just one question, is that getting changed to open and active goals?
Yeah, I was just gonna
Yeah,
ask
I
that.
can miss that one. I've got it in another spot, but I missed that one.
I missed it. Just to be clear, what are you guys deciding to do? Strike it and then
Striking
put,
after subsection 4.1, putting a period.
and not doing anything with the international code.
Probably not for that portion, I would guess.
Okay.
If that's.
I'm just doing notes, so that's what I was just
Open and active.
Yeah, open and active. Yep, I got that. Cause I missed that. When she had me review it.
Okay. Moving on, number 5, if applicant submits the commissioning plan process and financial assurance to the Norfolk Public Service Commission that meets or exceeds the requirements set out below, the applicant shall provide a copy of the decommissioning plan and financial assurance to the county prior to commencement of those facility operations, and the decommissioning plan requirements set forth in this section pursuant shall not apply in the event the decommissioning plan does not meet or exceed the requirements set out below. The applicant shall be required to provide the missing requirements to county. The decommissioning plan with $150,000 minimum cash bond, or 5%, whichever is higher, increase to account for coal seam and wildlife remediation risk.
5% of what?
I'm going to guess that that meant to say 5% of the project costs, but
That would be my assumption.
Well, just some food for thought with respect to that one. And the team can speak to this better, but 5% of project costs is generally a pretty significant amount because these projects cost hundreds of millions of dollars. And so then how I'm reading this as, and I'm just reading the second part. So let's say an applicant has to provide their bond to you, right? To the, or not even, or cash, it's cash, right? So it's not even just like a surety bond or something like that. We're potentially talking like how many millions of dollars in cash, which is not common industry standard. So usually you may see like, for the state, for example, for their decommissioning program that they have, they allow a variety of different financial mechanisms. So you can file a surety bond or like a letter of credit, and other things. And so I guess I would just propose that you maybe consider looking at the different types of financial assurance that the state accepts, and not specifically expressly require cash, because that's just not common throughout really any industry, to require that expressly.
I thought that did say shoot.
I don't have the other copy.
I think what she's saying is change it to gold.
Dirty gone.
guaranteed letter of credit, gold, Bitcoin.
Prices high, 25 million in gold is dollars.
I mean, I just opened the wind ordinance where we're talking financial assurance, and then under the road use and maintenance portion of it, it's saying in the form of a performance bond, either as a combination of surety, irrevocable letter of credit, that kind of different forms. Is that
I think that language was actually
More-
pulled from the PSC's decom reg, so I think, yeah, that's correct. And it's addressed in the administrative code under 6909-0908, but yeah, it's performance bond either as a combination of cash, escrow held by federal insured financial institution, surety bond, irrevocable letter of credit, guarantee, parent guarantee. Is that what that?
Yeah. So 30.5 of the wind stuff at subsection 2, I think.
We did it for one and not the other, and I think we were gonna put it
Yeah.
to the other one.
Yeah, that was maybe discussed
And
about
then just,
putting them in the same, so we're consistent across all portions, and that maybe just didn't carry over when
Okay.
we were going through this.
But like to Casey's point as well, you know, if the state typically does for other technologies, instead of, you know, a 5% of project cost for the operating period of the project, I think the state typically does the estimated cost of the actual decommissioning. That may make, you know, more sense and maintain that consistency with other technologies and other things that the state does.
Yeah.
So
I think
versus
we-
5%, you put estimated cost of decommissioning.
Yeah, I think
And
that's the
that-
way it works.
Yeah, and then the estimated cost of decommissioning, again, this is what the state does for wind and solar. That amount, so there's, and I want to be very clear, there's two phases of financial assurance that the state requires for wind and solar. The first part is a construction phase. And they just, because of the timeframes of getting the project approved and, you know, the start of construction, they just kind of slap a blanket 5% cost of construction. Or, excuse me, project cost. So 5% of your project cost, you must provide that a financial assurance in that amount just for the construction phase of the project. Then prior to a project's operation, the state requires you to have a decommissioning plan and cost estimate done by a licensed North Dakota engineer. And so a licensed North Dakota engineer looks at the project, provides, you know, an estimated decommissioning cost, and that is the number that you're required to place a financial assurance for the life of the facility, not that 5%. It's based upon that estimate.
If I'm reading this right, this cash bond or 5% that's in here only applies if the decommissioning plan does not meet or exceed the requirements set out below, and I'm guessing that's below on the page. So those must be extra requirements. We wouldn't have anything to do with decommissioning, that would be the PSC, right?
So right now, the PSC doesn't have any rules that expressly govern decommissioning. So my understanding is what you're trying to account for here is you're looking for some level of coverage while, you know, we assume the PSC will adopt them, but they may not, right? I can't speak for the PSC. And so I think what you're looking for is this interim coverage, right? So that in the event that the PSC does not adopt rules, or let's say an applicant doesn't voluntarily provide financial assurance to the PSC, you have a level of coverage at the county. And so let's say that something doesn't get placed at the PSC level, then it looks like, based upon my reading here, is that it would default to sub 5, where it says a decommissioning plan with a $150,000 minimum cash bond, or 5% of project cost, whichever is higher. And I will tell you right now that 5% of project cost will always be higher.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something I was trying to point out, is if your minimum is 150,000, when you're talking about 5% of project cost, we're talking potentially what, like
Tens of millions.
yes, of dollars. And so if you're wanting to mimic what the state does, I mean, we can help propose language to where it kind of simplifies and you're replicating what the state does in your ordinance. And obviously that would really only apply until which time the state adopts rules, if they end up adopting rules. But you can kind of adopt a mini framework similar to what the state does. And we're happy to provide a language to do that you could review and, comment on, see if you like it.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. Sounds reasonable. So, are we ready to move on? All owners are directed by certified mailing within a 2-mile radius of the project site boundary that a CUP application has been filed with the county. For the purpose of this subsection, owner of record means the owner identified the county treasurer to receive the real estate tax statement. This notice must be sent within 15 days of filing of the CUP application. The notice shall inform the recipient that the CUP application will be available for review at the courthouse.
And this was wording that NextEra had suggested in the red line version.
I've got a question about that. I was reading on this today and probably doesn't affect a whole lot of people, but in this scenario, it could potentially affect us. We've got interest in a piece of land with like 6 other people. We are not the ones that get the tax statement, but we are the only ones that live in North Dakota. So if we don't get along well with them or they don't pass this information along, how are we ever gonna know?
The county does have other ordinance, notice requirements that an applicant would have to follow, including, 2 weeks consecutively posting in the county paper, which is, I'm gonna get it wrong, it's
The Senate Republican,
thank you.
which not very many people get, just as like putting it out there.
Yeah.
From my understanding, the readership of that paper has gone down a little bit, so.
It's just to define the original ordinance language said adjacent landowners. We just wanted to put some quantifying and qualifying boundaries around that, cause that gets a little it turns into a gray area for an applicant. Speaking from experience, when we've tried to even mail landowner dinner notifications and things like that. I don't know if there's any other notice.
And I guess just one comment on the tax address issue. Eric Edison, also with Crowley Fleck law firm. So I think that's just something that we know is there and, can be depended on, because I know counties do it differently. Some of them might have, a remainder man and their address on there. But to actually find out all the people holding an interest in any parcel can actually take a significant amount of research in the county records. Say there's a tenant in common who hasn't appeared in the chain of title since the 1960s, which, although is really rare, could potentially happen, where the last address shown in the county records is from the 60s, and who knows if they're still there and stuff like that. So I understand your concern, but it's hard to find a workable alternative other than just going to what's in the tax record. So then at least, I understand, again, the issue of tenants in common, but at least someone who's paying the taxes is getting notice. And usually they're the one who's farming it, maybe in a lot of cases too, or working the land or closest connected with it because they're paying the taxes, and I don't know. But and notice generally is tough because readership is down in papers, and there is that kind of online multi-paper notice website now, but I don't know what kind of traffic they're getting, but I suspect that it's kind of tough to find those notices too unless you're looking for it and know it's coming. So
I think it was just aimed at more so providing a level of certainty for everyone, just because title can be so incredibly messy.
Would it help, doing it this way and then posting it on our county website.
Yeah, that's a great.
We have a lot of readers there.
Yeah, website, county has a Facebook
We have a
page.
Facebook
I've
page.
seen some counties do notices on there too for various things.
I think that probably has a bigger readership than.
And I think that could fall into just the general noticing, within the higher level ordinance, right? That's up to you though, of course. That's to decide if you wanna update it from just the Senate Republican and county website,
We try to
Facebook
put
page.
everything on the website and on Facebook. Between Jane and I, we keep it updated.
So do we wanna change that?
I think that.
Probably leave that.
Leave it
Wording
as
is
is.
fine,
Wouldn't hurt to
And,
I mean, not to this, but that we
to
just,
the general
Yeah.
notice.
we do that for meetings and everything else, we just take it on ourselves to put it on those places that people do look at.
Okay, let's move on. Number 8, all owners of Arthur Glen Road, that's one of the, number 10. Road tickets for rally must be provided,
Yes, young kids. Yeah.
for City Hall roads, as set forth in the road use and maintenance agreement. I remember talking about this last time, and
Patrick was good with this wording.
I think so.
Yeah.
I
So I
think so.
will read that as. That one, I don't know that I actually changed it, but there was a question, but I know that that was also briefly touched on, and I think we were just leaving it at 200 feet from the center line, but
that's a normal ordinance.
Yeah.
Setback, so.
the geological survey under D. I wanna say with that one, we're not sure that, they don't actually do any approvals. So we weren't sure if we take that over, if we leave it. I highlighted it because I had questions on it, so.
Are we still doing the 2 miles now?
Well, that was never discussed at the last meeting, so.
That's, you changed it to 500 feet? Yeah, that's.
On the previous one, but this one wasn't
Yeah,
noted,
so we'll
so we
go
have to
500
change
feet
that.
on that one. Open active.
Yeah.
Okay with that then?
Well, the ND Geological Survey, they don't actually approve anything, so we would probably
Take
just
it out.
take that out completely.
That was probably in there for topographical maps.
Most likely, but the wording here says that you have to prove it, so. So this next part, 31.6.2, highlighted the whole thing, because I remember there being a comment on there, about the information relating to this, referencing the DMV and that, yeah, there was questions. I had no actual changes, I just highlighted it because we really weren't sure, and that was where you guys were coming in to kind of explain some of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, one of the things, is that right? Okay, sorry. Step on anybody's tip. One of the things that, NFPA 55, and you guys have referenced this here, calls out is UL 9540 certification and UL 9540A testing. This UL 9540A testing is really important. Essentially, this is something that our vendors do for all of our batteries, and any battery that is an FPA 55 compliant would have to go through this testing. They will actually start a thermal event in the battery. They'll do it at the cell level and I think at the module level, and they measure the propagation. They make sure that the propagation certainly doesn't happen outside the container. Shouldn't happen from rack to rack. Measure the propagation if there's any in the module to module or cell to cell, and then we provide those results to the drum. So by doing that, right, they're confirming that the method that they use to stop thermal propagation is functioning correctly, and it's the best kind of test you can have. It's not modeled. They actually do it. They just start they heat it up until it fails, and then watch to make sure it doesn't propagate. There's a bunch of different ways they can accomplish that. So they could accomplish. So there are some systems that have active suppression. There's some systems that have a suppressant that basically sits inside the module, and when it gets hot, it comes, evaporates, and it sits on the bottom, evaporates, comes up, and kind of extinguishes the thermal event, where it sucks the heat out at least. There's thermal barriers that folks use. There's different types of deprivation and ventilation that folks use, but there are different designs that folks have used to accomplish these goals. But all of them have to go through this testing. And so, by part of this, and the code is designed to allow for that, as long as it does go through that testing and it works. And so part of this, the fire suppression systems, we don't actually recommend active fire suppression. It dumps water on a device that may be, in some sort of catastrophic failure. It can be leakage, it can be runoff. There's, additional complications that can come with that. Another thing that can happen is, and this has happened at other folks' sites before that use active suppression, is the active suppression system can malfunction. And when that happens, you can actually cause an event, right? If you have water that gets onto the batteries, that's not good either. And so there are different ordinances. You'll find, if you research ordinances and codes and things, you'll find some ordinances that are active suppression. We would not recommend it for those reasons. It probably hurts more than it helps, given there are several designs that accomplish these goals without active suppression. The 20-foot spacing kind of goes along the same lines. There's different designs and different safeguards that are put in place. There are spacing requirements that are in the codes. It's mostly from the containers to the external walls to make sure that there is that natural break between the containers and that there's the external fencing and the outside and the exterior of the site. But there are different designs for how the enclosures are set up and put into place, and not all of them may have 20 feet spacing, but they all will go through this UL 9548 testing.
For example, to piggyback off that, our standard battery design right now maintains a 3-foot spacing between battery enclosures.
But will not have container. Yeah, should not have container.
Exactly. But it's still designed to UL 9548.
You said active fire suspension.
Suppression.
Suspension systems. Is there such a thing as a passive one?
Yeah, so I guess I probably may be using the wrong terminology here, but I'm considering the one where you have the suppressant that's kind of sitting there underneath the cells, and as the cells heat up, it evaporates on its own and kind of extinguishes. I would consider that one passive. I'm not sure if that is the official terminology or not, but I generally think the active suppression is water that you're pumping in and spraying on. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You got it.
Okay. Got that, Jaden?
So
So we're gonna eliminate
sorry.
A and B. Is that what there's so many like and
I was just thinking 2.
all of them are two, B, and C.
The other benefit to using the codes, I guess, rather than prescribing this, again, is that they will be updated, right? So NFPA will be updated, and some of our folks know this as well, right? As you know, requirements from these agencies are monitored frequently as battery technologies improve from a safety perspective, and they update the regulations according to that. So that is a benefit of referring to the codes and letting the codes do that because they are the experts.
I just have to make sure that I update to the correct International Fire Code versus the NFPA because that is what was discussed last week.
Makes sense, yeah.
With North Dakota having that one versus the NFPA, I guess, so.
Yeah, it should be 1207, but check me on
What
that.
is the DND, that's the, what system is that?
So in Carly's email, it kind of addresses that's kind of something that's behind a paywall that we would have to pay to provide for somebody to reference unless they pay for it themselves, kind of a thing, so.
Some international fire code is
And that is guidance that a consultant put out, right? It's not a,
It's not
I mean,
a code per se,
right,
it's just a reference guide.
Okay, number 3, prohibition of gas in areas of open coal seams unless geotechnical analysis confirms non-emission risk.
I think Carly addressed that really well in her letter.
I think so too.
I think we were just taking out
That portion altogether.
Just delete that whole thing.
Well, just a quick question, given some of the changes that were just made to the prior section, it seems like there's maybe some duplication in 31.6.2.3. Where it talks about maintaining operation of fire suppression systems.
Also said the on-site attendant. I don't remember talking about that, but that would require somebody to be there,
Yeah, on there, yeah.
like stationed there, like a punishment.
You can.
I know it says one of the following measures, so
Yeah, although
maybe they need to be read through and refined perhaps, but I do think that would at least allow an applicant to select one. I don't think anyone's selecting that one though, as it currently reads.
You don't know.
unless you have something.
She's right though, I mean, sorry to say this, but I mean, you kind of already have the fire figured out in the previous one. So you're duplicating it almost in that second one.
That whole section is pretty
Yeah.
much a duplication.
Yep.
31.6.2.3. Seems to be pretty redundant. Except for like on the second page. Did they ever put these in highly populated areas where like in a city?
There are some that are in
Somebody
more
could
urban
like
areas.
have somebody who could just drive to work and sit there all day, not like out in the middle of nowhere.
We don't, I mean, we don't have folks that typically just sit at the site and watch them all day. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to do. We do have, we have operations and maintenance personnel for our sites that are stationed at the O&M buildings that we have, and we would, likely, if this site was close to the existing wind farms we have in the area, we would likely use those operations and maintenance buildings or expand those potentially, or whatever we need to do to house some of the battery technicians there.
I don't remember we were talking about this on
But
the
the-
site thing.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
24/7 on-site person. I mean, it looks like our folks didn't necessarily call that out, but but I do agree with you that this is not standard and not we obviously wouldn't select option 1 there.
That it sounds like a cruel punishment.
I want that job.
Way to brush up on your solitaire.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, why don't we keep moving on?
Are we taking it out?
Taking that out, or what are we doing?
Yeah, take
I need to know, so I can update it.
Let's take it out.
Which part, just gonna be
One,
one, okay?
I think two is already is duplicated.
Honestly, a lot of them are, like the whole section.
Well, where is this?
Cause like 3 says the selected measure 24/7 attendance or fires.
Yeah.
You guys already spoke about fire suppression previously. So.
C and D though in section 2, I don't think has been addressed in the other section. It's about training.
The training is in number 1 in 31. This one, Linda.
This here.
Yeah, because they have to give us an emergency response.
So then this is just been saying
Yeah.
the same thing
Yep.
over.
Yep.
Okay.
And this is what we want. I mean, we want them to go with the EMS and everything. So that's why I said it's kind of duplicating it.
Number 5 is about violation.
That one we can.
Don't we talk about violation though in a separate section?
Yeah, there's an enforcement and penalty section.
Yeah.
Ordinance.
Because this one just says if they're not with that section. So if we're gonna take it out, we don't wanna fine them for something that's.
Would the one at the end apply to the entire ordinance?
No.
Oh,
Number 5?
no, the one, there's a enforcement, fine
Yes.
$2,000 for.
Yeah.
applies to the whole thing.
Yep. So you're basically just saying the same thing.
So we're just putting that whole thing up.
Yep.
Section. Okay.
And then that means that those will
And
have to
then
be.
we're leaving 31.6.2 number 1 and then number 1 and 2 as a, this is the requirements, but there's no extra.
This one you're taking
No.
out. Oh, what?
Just,
Which one?
okay, go for it. So we took this part out. Oh, we lost this and this because it's, yep, and this is just duplicative of all of that. Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yep, okay. I just wanna make sure I get it right before I go back and make these changes and it's.
I'll make sure to look at it a little bit closer this time. I thought I did, but apparently. Open and
We
active's got
typically
me.
do, I think, at our sites.
Yep.
Right, yep.
3163, it's not highlighted, but maybe I wasn't paying attention last week.
I don't know that we went through a lot of this last year. I think we went through
Fencing,
some of the
lighting.
other stuff, but-
Well, and they pretty much, you said the same thing, like you guys do have the chain link, the motion activated sensors. Noise must be at 45, so.
But one thing on the noise, if I might, we typically would see, and I think this is consistent with the Wayne code, that you would have 45 decibels at the, like 100 feet from the nearest occupied structure as opposed to the property line. Just because you'd expect the property line to be, potentially, given the setbacks that you have, maybe 100 or 200 feet away.
Given that they bought the entire quarter, so that would be a long ways.
Oh, that we
Well, the one out here,
Oh.
anyways, they had
Oh, the substation.
a substation way out here. That's a lot of land.
Well,
It makes sense.
So at the nearest structure, you said?
the 100
100
feet
feet.
from any occupied structure, right? We would do modeling and see where the noise contours land, and we would make sure that it is less than or equal to 45 decibels 100 feet from any occupied structure, right? Just because maybe a little bit higher if you're standing right on the
What
fence.
if it's not currently occupied, like it's for rent, but nobody rented it kind of thing?
Oh, well, you would define occupied structure, but from my perspective, that should be considered occupied in my case.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are we at?
Well, were the fencing and the security and the lighting, did that look okay then? That we have it in
She'd
there?
already talked
Okay.
about that, and it sounded like what you were already doing.
Yep,
Yeah, all of that's pretty standard with
okay.
typically for projects.
Okay, there's no else within 2 miles of an open and active coal seam.
I think that's just
500
change.
Yeah,
I just noticed that in number 1, it says no best within 1,000 feet of wetlands, floodplains, Missouri, or open coal seams.
Suppose we gotta change that to
I think we
500?
can take open coal
Or
seams
just
out of
take
number 1
open.
because it's addressed in number 2.
Or should we just take,
Or just leave it just like that.
Well, then we got
Take
no,
that part
the
out.
geological survey
take that
does
out,
not
Right.
approve anything.
We just do the deed.
Also, keep in mind that 1,000 feet from a wetland, what is a wetland in the way that you referenced it can be
Depends
pretty,
on how much rain we've had.
pretty subjective. So I would consider a proposed striking the reference of wetlands, just for reference. A facility would go before the state for siting, right? That it would look at the site where a project's being proposed. And one of the commission's avoidance areas are wetlands, right? So that's something that the state looks at when an applicant would go before them to site a facility. And so, not being within or imposing a setback from 1,000 feet of 1,000 feet from wetlands could be problematic for just, that reason. Are you talking about jurisdictional wetlands?
wetlands are actually defined by the Soil Conservation Service. Farmers deal with that all the time.
Well, right, but there are certain wetlands that are like jurisdictional to the core, and you have to get certain like nationwide permits, right, to impact them. There are other, maybe I guess it's not clear what exactly would fit into that category, and 1,000 feet is significant, I guess. So it's very significant. That would be what I'd propose.
Take the 1,000 feet out.
Just the wetlands.
I mean,
Plans
yeah,
and
the
water.
wetlands, yes, correct.
Leave that. So-
And then, or open,
And then just strike the
Coal
open
seams.
coal seams because it's addressed in number 2. That acceptable?
Okay. Then we can go down to number 8, the applicant shall comply with North Dakota Service Commission tree and shrub mitigation specifications. Applicant shall provide the county with a copy of the applicant's approved tree and shrub mitigation plan to demonstrate compliance.
And this was wording that was pulled from wind, because that's what we talked about last week as a recommendation, rather than having an actual tree and shrub mitigation requirements and hours we use what the PSC currently has, and we have to provide that
just a copy,
to us.
yeah, so we have it on file.
And we're at 31.7.
I could ask a question on this. What's intended by the greenhouse gas emissions calculation? I'm sorry. The battery won't actually emit any.
number 10.
Yeah, number 10 on the.
31.6.6.
The battery won't actually emit any greenhouse gas emissions, but maybe that's intended to capture emissions during mining, or I'm not sure exactly what that intent is, and that it's not something I've seen before. It looks like it was a part of the DMV suggestions, but I'm honestly not sure how we would go about doing that. I have to do some research.
I think we could just leave that out, you know?
I wasn't sure if it was important to you guys or what.
You guys, tell me what to do.
I'm not a big global warming guy, so I would just leave it out.
Sure. What do you guys want?
Tell me what to do. Okay.
I don't know how you would do that.
If people who are within this industry have never run into that before, we have to kind of take that into consideration because they know more about it than we do.
I mean, I haven't run into it, to be clear.
If you've never run into it before and you've been doing this for a while, I would say that it's okay that we
We can always add it back in.
in the
Later. Yes.
Okay, third one is 7, decommissioning plan.
And we kind of talked about that too, so.
There may be ways
Another
to
section.
simplify that too, because it is referenced in multiple sections.
Sure.
So maybe when we send proposal
Yeah.
over for your consideration, we can propose streamlining it into one spot.
Sure. Yep.
That would be okay with me. Yep. If it's okay with all of you. We could almost just remove it from the previous section because we now have a section that says decommissioning.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So I'll just make that note up here.
And the next one on cash bond and total project cost.
That's the same thing, isn't it? Or
We just discussed this, which is like really recent.
That was this previous one. Yeah, so we'll just, everything will get simplified.
Yeah.
Because it's stated in this first requirement.
I thought we were gonna take this one out and read it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, I will just put a note that we are waiting wording. Recommendation.
Okay, and it looks like the last one is 31.10.3.
I think they talked about number 3 in length.
This is the one that we added based on conversation last week.
Yeah.
There's recommendation made, we talked about it. This is the updated wording based on what was discussed last week. So I think this one is okay.
Okay. Wind,
Thank you for coming
Return to
in.
the peanut
Thank
gallery.
We appreciate your input.
No, thank you guys
Very
for having
much.
us. We love coming to talk about this.
I'll let you get going.
try to get it done.
The wind shouldn't be too much, because we pretty much did everything.
We spent quite a bit of time on that last
Yep.
time, so. 35.1.1, public notification.
That was the same as the one that's in the books.
Yep. And that was wording that was updated based on discussion last week.
Yeah, because we were saying that the public hearing, or they had to do it prior to submission of the
Building.
application. And we changed it to where they just have to do it prior to the public hearing. So give us notification.
And next page, we highlighted via the load test system.
Yep, that was just language added in because that wasn't original.
Okay, okay.
Same with number 6.
Yep.
That was discussed and Patrick was okay with this one.
Number 6 and 7, that was discussed in length as well. Just added verbiage.
So we're okay with them?
Yeah, it was just added verbiage, so, or added the defined.
The next one is 30.4.
Because that's already a PSC requirement, we just put that wording in there that they must provide basically that they are following what the PSC said to us.
Just one copy.
And 30.5, number 2.
And this was something that had gotten me some financial assurance down through the road use and maintenance because as a county, we can require a bond for road maintenance and repairs and that kind of thing. So that's why that would come with there. So that one is,
Number 2, you took it out, or you?
no, that stays right where it's at.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't see the road.
Nope, yep.
On the previous.
Same with number 3, and that one was discussed quite a bit too. So.
And water usage. Okay with that, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than this reference to the century code portion, I think there was a question on that because that one was maybe referencing the levies. And I'm not quite sure which one we're supposed to put in there or if we just take that part out. I didn't quite find that one, so. Do you have an answer on that one?
When I reviewed that portion of Century Code, it really just did not seem applicable to what you were
Sure.
envisioning.
Sure.
But the water board, I mean, because we do have a water board.
Yeah. And just remove the in accordance with portion.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, all amendable if we find something that we need to adjust.
Weed control.
This one we did talk about also.
We spent quite a bit of time on that.
Yes.
Yep. I think this one is all okay, this one. That number 3 under 30.8, I was just looking at it and I know there was a question on it because it's a requirement by the PSC. But we already have this language in our current ordinance, so I think leaving it in there is okay because we already have it in there. I mean, this isn't anything that was added or changed.
Looks like you're gonna take out the.
Yes, I'm going to take out the asterisks that say this is already.
Does your current ordinance provide that everything be removed within 6 months?
Yes.
It does.
I looked for it the other day just to verify, and yeah, I know that was a question because it's required by PSC, so when I was looking at our original one, I did find that in there, and this is pretty much, this is word for word what was already in there.
Was there discussion, I thought there was discussion about maybe making it consistent with what the state requires as far as duration for removal. So, the state reg requires 24 months.
Okay.
Yeah,
6 months might not be long enough if you like count from when it starts to get cold.
Right.
well, right, yeah, and I mean, the commission, the PSC already oversees, the financial assurance piece of decommissioning. It's pretty significant. So my recommendation would be if you're gonna keep those provisions in there, I would align them with the state's requirements.
Now, could you say that again?
So they're basically just changing 6 months to 24 months, right?
Correct. I mean, the PSC's rules have a little more nuance to them because they talk about from end of useful life. They get very specific. So, I mean,
If you
could
reference
just,
PSC.
yeah, you could just reference an applicant shall comply with the decommissioning requirements in,
Or the reclamation ones again.
Yeah, in that section.
because honestly I guess that's not really applicable to something.
So, the recommendation of PSC. Upon termination or abandonment of leases, terminee shall comply with.
Basically what the plan is with PSC.
PSC.
requirements. The underground collection cables portion also get removed on there?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanna check.
It's just gonna be that.
Okay. That's it.
Are we up to 30.9?
Yep.
Are we okay with that?
Yeah, we talked about that because we were telling them they have to give us, and they don't know right away, so.
Really isn't much. I don't know if there's a paper with what you want.
Well, I guess just food for thought if, to consider as you're looking at this with respect to the GPS coordinates of wind towers. Currently under 30.9, paragraph 1 sub C, it says that any changes to the proposed tower locations after initial CUP submission shall be approved or shall be provided by the applicant and approved by the P&Z and the county commission. So that would then include like any type of micro siting, any negligible shifts that may be needed. And so I would just consider that could be a significant amount of additional approvals that would otherwise be required by both the P&Z and the county commission if you're intending to also,
Crazy.
If I remember correctly last week, sorry to interrupt, didn't we say that it's not to be approved, but we just have to be notified? Isn't that what we said last week?
I think it was just notified.
Notified that,
Maybe just delete and approve them, unless you want to set a specific distance.
Does this happen that there's small changes in siting?
yes.
I thought it was just notification because of that you contact the county and let us know.
The previous ordinance said any minor changes such as a small shift to a turbine would be, again, not like adding a turbine, deleting a turbine, that would go back for approval.
Right.
A minor was just notification to,
Would wording that would be saying significant changes must be approved and then adding in minor changes just must be notified? Is that,
yeah.
because I feel like if we're just gonna put any changes, just to be notified, you guys could technically move a turbine completely, I mean, like 2 miles from where it originally was, and then we kind of have a problem there,
Yeah, no,
so.
that's completely fair. So section 30.11 changes to permit already kind of outlines this, and that's why we had but struck the language and changed it a little. And this is kind of contradictory now.
Yeah.
30.9.
So we could almost take, hold on. You could almost take 2 out if you wanna put those changes to the permit in this one. Then it has its own section. Because it's under additional application requirements, well, it's kinda after the fact.
Let me do some wording magic tomorrow.
Yeah, I think it's 30.91 subsection C could match the language of 30.11 subsection 1. That would probably match up a little better and much better for an applicant. Again, that still reserves the right for major changes required approval.
Okay, I will do some wording, something, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, except, what do you guys think? We're just kinda spitting stuff out here.
When it comes to changes,
Yeah.
if it's major, it requires approval, anything minor.
Significant.
Significant
Major,
changes.
significant, minor, just gets notified.
Okay, that
Okay.
sounds good.
Okay.
What's the magic number?
I don't know, I mean, I would do the one. Yeah, one left.
Yep. Whatever the last date on it.
The rest of it was fine, like the 3, E, and 4, A,
Yeah.
6.
Oh, I guess I just have a question regarding 4, because in other instances, it acknowledges that if a project is under the purview of the PSC, then that consultation will occur through the PSC siting process. So 4, under biological resource survey, it says under the purview of the PSC, and I believe that should probably say unless under the purview of the PSC.
Okay.
Was that the intent? I'm just curious as to what.
I did not bring my cheat sheet of chicken scratches.
So basically, what you're saying is like, if you're not, if your facility is not subject to PSC siting, you're not going to the PSC. We want you to go and do this consultation with the North Dakota Game and Fish.
Right.
And so, and then you recognize that if you are going to the PSC, we're not going to require that because the state requires it. So yeah, I guess my recommendation, if that's the intent, what I just said, is you'd want to change that to unless under.
That makes sense. Okay. Yep.
And the last change was just that notification on the water usage. On the water usage. Yep.
Are we done then?
No, but
Is there any other comments before we?
sorry.
I guess I just have a little cleanup edit that I saw with respect to the North Dakota licensed engineer for the road portion. sorry, I just saw, there was just a typo, I can just maybe
Oh,
point it out
oh, yeah.
afterwards that it would be helpful to probably get clarified. It's in sub 2.
Yep.
And as determined by an independent civil engineer who is licensed in North Dakota.
Yeah.
Straight, apostrophe S and straight cost assessment,
Okay.
and then I think then we're on clear.
Okay.
Right?
It was nice to have somebody else look at yourself.
And on the last, change under 30.9, number 6, the water usage plan, these are application requirements required for a conditional use permit application. NextEra had originally struck that language as well as landowner notifications for water usage plan, only because at the time of CUP submittal, it's very unlikely an applicant would already have applied for water permits if construction isn't gonna start a year or more in the future, right? So that's why we had struck it there. I know it's prior in the ordinance. If the commissioners aren't comfortable with striking it there, perhaps something delineating it to say that it, landowner notifications, are required once water permits are obtained. That, again, just to ensure an applicant.
I think they said once water, everything's obtained, then you send out the notification, correct? Is that what we were talking about last week?
Yeah.
Correct, that's just not how that reads.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying, that's how it was supposed to read.
That might have been one of my question marks. I was trying to figure out what I was putting in there.
Okay, yeah, like once they're obtained, then, and then you just let us know at the county that you sent those notifications out.
Yep. And that's in the water section, 30.6 under subsection 2. So again,
Just
I might
whatever.
just recommend striking the words landowner notifications, but however the commissioners wanna handle it, if you wanna just add additional language so it's consistent, that's also fine. Thank you.
I could probably just take that out.
Yeah, I mean, it just,
I will just.
wherever we want, or wherever it looks best.
Okay. Austin would like me to address the significant changes.
Okay.
He was thinking that, there should be a definite distance on that, 500,000 feet or something like that. And what's a significant change? 2 feet, 5 feet?
If you're moving the
500
turbine,
feet.
what's a significant change? So if you have to move it for purposes of whatever you may find when you start digging. I know you said that 2 meetings ago. What if there's like something that was there that they didn't know was there, a well or whatever? And you have to move the turbine. So what is a significant change? What did you consider significant?
I had kind of questioned that too.
How far could you move something before you had to reorder supplies because you didn't, get enough whatever to go with?
I'm just looking up, we have a measurement for the Federal Aviation Administration of 1 arc second. Let me just see how many feet that is. I don't know my arc second to foot.
That's pretty small. That's
Okay,
gonna be really small. Yeah,
okay, alright, let me see.
I think.
But at that point, I don't know if that's like even the right method. I'm thinking what would be, what did Austin say?
500 to 1,000, somewhere underneath.
I was just
Or-
gonna say
or more
like
than that.
500 seems.
I would say
500 or more seems significant to me.
Yeah.
If it's less than that, maybe it's not.
I agree
And
with that.
CSC requires kind of notification if you're changing locations. I think
There's
500 feet would trigger their requirement too.
oh yeah, there's additional notices at the state level.
Right. It just, to me, if you're making a move that significant, 500 plus feet, it's changing the permit that you got approved for here also. So
And that seems reasonable, but I guess I defer to Sarah on that as you're the one that-
500 feet is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Which section,
Good changes after that.
You're saying 500 feet could put you into a different section or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
a quarter.
It could change the
So-
actual town, like the section.
change the easement.
And depending on where things are going, yeah.
Right.
Change the easement, might change the land noticed as part of the project area, which would then obviously trigger different requirements too. So, I mean, certain things, setbacks and stuff are gonna trigger, more filings or approvals, even if it's way less than 500 feet too, so.
Okay,
Okay. We're done now.
well,
So where do
For
we,
the day.
for today.
we're saying, where do we go from here?
Make these changes, I send them out. You guys tell me, do we feel that we need another work session? I don't wanna put this into a hearing without okay of putting it into a hearing. But do we just do
I really don't think we need another work
not
session.
necessarily a work session, but our next regular meeting isn't until the end of July.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe just get the changes out and then,
figure out a
and
date
then,
from there. Can we do that?
yeah.
I will make the changes, send them out. You guys send me date ideas.
Any dates other than,
Dates other than the end of July.
We need to get this,
We should get this done and not push it back even more, right?
Yeah.
So, cause we have the other two
Yeah.
that we need to work on also, so.
Great.
I know the county moved the commission meeting to the
July
8th. I don't know if that could, I know I'll be here already, so I'm the least important person in the room, but just a
That is a
suggestion.
Tuesday. We moved the commission meeting to July 8th. It's 1:00 in the afternoon is the commission meeting, but if you guys would want to meet that evening, or that Monday evening, or
maybe the Monday.
well, the commissioners can't do anything.
we can't
anyways.
just act on it
Oh,
at the
that's true,
commission
yeah.
meeting, but.
Yeah.
I
The best thing would be is if we have a suggestion, work session 2 weeks prior to the end of our meeting, so so our July meeting can be the first reading. But if you guys wanna send us some dates 2 weeks prior, that'd be perfect.
Okay.
our July meeting is the 31st.
Yeah, so you got plenty, like the first part of July.
It's not the first week. 'Cause
Why not?
Holiday, okay?
You don't wanna blow stuff up.
That's a portion of it, that's probably payroll week, so obviously.
Oh, let's do a payroll week.
Well, it isn't.
Oh, darn it. Second week then. Hey, I'm not in her
I
office.
will make the changes and we can figure out a date, because we are currently missing
2,
2, and then a
possibly 3.
third will hopefully get somebody.
By that
to
time,
open spot. So,
Okay,
okay,
with that, meeting adjourned.
awesome.
Thank you guys.
Really nice to meet you guys. Thank
Yeah,
you.
nice,
Thank you for
thank
letting
you.
us participate and
No.
sit in the comfy chairs at the desk.